Virtuoso is the newest Fury and Mind legend with a control playstyle very reminiscent of Daughter of the Void from Origins. But where Kai'Sa leans heavily into tempo to lock opponents out of the game early on, Jhin plays for big combos that aim to dismantle late game boards. This legend reads, when you play a spell, if you spent 4 energy or more, you may banish it. Then, if there are 4 spells banished with me, put each in its trash, channel 4 runes, and draw 1. When piloting this deck, you want to be playing spells as often as possible and spending a minimum of 4 energy on them. These will usually be 4-cost spells and 2-cost repeat spells, but can also extend to higher numbers. Generally speaking, you want to stick to 2, 4, and 6-cost cards in this deck, because even runes will allow for cleaner combos off of your legend. This effect basically offers the same benefit as Kai'Sa, but inverted and with some restrictions. Kai'Sa saves runes throughout the game by covering 1 power cost every turn, whereas Jhin incentivizes the use of power throughout the game by providing 4 runes once he reaches 4 spell requirement. This results in massive pop-off sequences where you can pay up to 16 energy in 1 turn. So this legend is well suited for players who enjoy control decks with long-term payoffs. The first thing you'll notice when exploring this legend is the synergy within his core package. Both of his chosen champions complement him well, and spells like Downstage Dramatics, Upstage Comedy, Deadly Flourish, and his signature all play vital roles in executing his game plan. Downstage Dramatics and Upstage Comedy being 2-cost repeat spells also helps to add some much needed flexibility, as paying 4 energy or more for a spell isn't optimal for every turn, and you won't always have a clean 4 energy to round out sequences with. However, the main appeal for this legend is his pop-off potential. As mentioned earlier, this legend can reach 16 energy in 1 turn when he's able to play more conservatively, which is more than enough to wipe entire boards at any stage of a game. Combine this wealth of energy with the versatile control options found within the Fury and Mind domains, and this legend can cut down any major threats while scoffing at smaller units. And, as already mentioned, while not quite as obvious or intuitive as Daughter of the Void, Virtuoso is very resourceful when it comes to power, as long as you're able to consistently trigger his ability, which is much easier than it may seem when the deck is built optimally. The most glaring weakness of Virtuoso is how slow the setup is for his core strategy. Compared to new legends like Pridestalker and Blood Harbor Ripper, which are ready to go on turn 1, you're looking at turn 4 at the earliest to trigger his ability, and if you do manage to trigger it that quickly, you've either given up a lot of points early, or your opponent is somehow playing even slower than you. The patience required for this deck is usually rewarded, but falling behind on points and tempo is oftentimes a necessary sacrifice. Additionally, this legend is terrible in combat. He does have access to some solid mid-range units and a decent closer, but as a control legend that's built for playing expensive spells, direct combat is not an area he's very comfortable in. With most of Jhin's best damage spells being default speed, he also has to be careful to deal as much damage as possible before initiating any showdowns offensively, and this deck's defense is really bad for the same reasons. One spell getting countered can potentially shut down your entire offensive plan for a turn, forcing you back into development mode. And finally, because of Virtuoso's general strategy, he doesn't have a very optimal first turn compared to most legends. He wants to be playing his 4-cost spells as much as possible, which means the first turn can be a bit of a waste at times. The early point that's usually guaranteed from your opening 2-drop is certainly appreciated, but he cares much more about mid and late game board control than he does about early scoring. This legend is all about developing resource advantages, which leaves Pouty Poro, Watchful Sentry, and Plundering Poro as your best opening turn 2-drops. Prepared Neophyte is a solid 3-drop if you go second, but will usually be reserved for matchups where you're willing to get offensive a little earlier. The best early game options for units are Virtuoso's 2 chosen champions, Noxus Hopeful, and Kai'Sa Survivor. The chosen champion slot is very dependent on how you built your deck and which matchups you're facing, as both are strong within their own right. If you're up against a slower matchup where you can more easily set up and protect Murderous Artists, then he's a fine option. Otherwise, I would stick to Meticulous Killer for most matchups. Kai'Sa Survivor can serve as a fast offensive unit, and Noxus Hopeful is good for board development. For mid-game units, Echo Recurrent is great for chipping away at big holds without sacrificing too much energy. And Hui, Brooding Painter, is fun to test with, as the versatility he offers for combat, resource management, and draw support can go a long way with this legend. The only late game unit you could consider running a copy of is Revna the Lorekeeper, just to add some speed to your offense. But even with her synergy with Virtuoso, playing a unit that's this expensive that doesn't have any control capabilities isn't really worth it. Offensive spells are where this deck really expands on its card pool. Singularity, Piercing Light, Frigid Touch, Curtain Call, Upstage Comedy, and Deadly Flourish are all solid spells that will trigger your legend ability. And Void Seeker, Falling Star, and Smokescreen are cheaper spells that won't trigger your legend ability, but are proven control options that fit in this archetype really well. And Lotus Trap is also a good option for increasing the effectiveness of these spells. As for defense, reaction spells don't commonly fit into this legend's goals, which leaves Retreat as the most viable option. Draw support is of course crucial for any control deck, as it's vital that you have access to the best control options for any situation. The Mind Domain is known to have the most draw support options of any color, with Consult the Past, Progress Day, and Downstage Dramatics as the best options for Virtuoso. Production Surge is also a really good all-around spell that helps with drawing, board development, and progressing toward your legend ability. The only equipment you should consider playing is Longsword to help your mid-range units get over other mid-range units, but this isn't always the most necessary. And for gear, Hextech Anomaly is a really unique inclusion that works really well with this legend. Without this gear, there are many situations where you find yourself with too many runes available and not enough power to cycle them back into the rune deck before triggering your legend ability. Hextech Anomaly allows you to recycle runes that have already been spent to increase your overall energy count by rechanneling those same runes when you trigger Virtuoso's legend ability. There's still only 2 legitimate closures within the Mind Domain, and since Time Warp doesn't really work with this legend, that leaves Thousand-Tailed Watcher as the best option. Even with the Chaos Domain still dominating with all of its removal spells, Thousand-Tailed Watcher has a lot of value with Virtuoso, thanks to its strong synergy with control spells. In most late game situations, Thousand-Tailed Watcher's effect can be enough to win games even without accelerating the unit. Some solid tech options are Thermo Beam for equipment based decks, Unchecked Power for late game hold decks, Rocket Barrage for mid-range decks as well as gear centered decks, Dancing Grenade for aggro decks that like to flood the board, and Sprite Burst for games where you need a little extra offense but can't risk losing permanent units. Some good first game battlefields that complement this legend's identity are the Candlelit Sanctum and Forgotten Library. Void Gate is a decent battlefield that will help you establish tempo when going first by increasing your damage on opposing units. And Vilemaw's Lair is a strong alternative as it gives more viability to Piercing Light and slows down Conquer decks. And Rockfall Path is a solid battlefield for going second, as ambush and hidden units are incredibly annoying for this deck when contesting battlefields. Some of this legend's core combos are Downstage Dramatics into Jhin Meticulous Killer, Lotus Trap or Frigid Touch into Falling Star, Singularity, or Piercing Light, Kaisa Survivor into Upstage Comedy, and any 4-cost spell into your legend ability into another 4-cost spell. Hextech Anomaly is also a really good card that slots well into pretty much any combo this deck wants. Fury cards to be wary of are Pouty Poro, Brenhir Thundersong, Rengar Unseen, and Vi Hot-Headed. Calm cards to be wary of are Defy, Not So Fast, Aurelia Fervent, and Ally Eager Admirer. The Mind Domain doesn't really have any hard counters. Body cards to be wary of are Sabotage, Ruin Runner, Poppy Paragon, and Irresistible Feyfolk. Chaos cards to be wary of are Hard Bargain, Abandon, Vex Apathetic, and Baron Nashor. Galio Indefatigable is really annoying to deal with against order decks. Sigil of the Storm is a really difficult battlefield to play with. And Riposte, Thrill of the Hunt, Wilting Lullaby, and Void Assault are legend cards that this deck struggles to play into. Taking a look at how Virtuoso fares against the new legends, Scorn of the Moon, Deceiver, Green Father, and Keeper of the Hammer are generally his best matchups. Scorn of the Moon is really easy to control as she's very low to the ground when it comes to units, and most of her strength is in direct combat, which Virtuoso can prevent by clearing her units before initiating showdowns. Deceiver does some of the work for you as she consistently kills her own units, which can simplify Virtuoso's game plan. However, her ability to suddenly accelerate her offense can be tricky to navigate, and Atacon in particular makes it very difficult to score in the late game. Keeper of the Hammer is relatively easy to control as a hold legend, but can wall you off late if you mismanage key cards like Thousand-Tailed Watcher and Singularity. And Green Father is generally a winnable matchup when he stacks battlefields, but can be difficult to play against when he's more protective of his units in base. The most neutral matchups against the newest legends are Wuju Master, Gloomist, and Piltover Enforcer. Wuju Master is a bit of a coin flip, as he needs his early units to stack up XP, which gives Virtuoso a sizable window to block him out of the game early. However, if he does manage to hit his breakpoints with better tempo than Virtuoso, the game is pretty much over. Gloomist is probably the most even matchup on paper, as Gloomist is a hold deck, which means her units are almost always exposed to damage spells, and her core strategy revolves around stuns, which doesn't impact Virtuoso much. But the Calm and Chaos domains have the best and widest pool of counter options of any domain combination, which can slow down Virtuoso tremendously. And similar to Wuju Master, Piltover Enforcer is relatively easy to control early, but once she has her equipment online and deflect unit set up, every spell starts to feel heavier and heavier as the game progresses, on top of her ability to suddenly score quick points once she spikes. The worst matchups are Pride Stalker, Void Reaver, Blood Harbor Ripper, and Bashful Bloom. Generally speaking, all of these matchups are difficult because of how much faster they are and how much stronger they are in combat. It can feel impossible to win showdowns against Pride Stalker and Void Reaver due to their ability to force their units out of position and play more reactively. Blood Harbor Ripper can be very hard to control thanks to his own control options, and his ability to switch from his usual hold playstyle to aggro combos that can't be stopped at default speed leaves Virtuoso with few options for contesting battlefields. And Bashful Bloom is just a nightmare combination of speed, temporary units, and a plethora of control options, including her own signature. Here's a quick look at my recommended build for someone who's looking to test out the Virtuoso legend without any specific matchups in mind. Let me know your thoughts on this build and what you might change. That wraps up this Virtuoso legend breakdown. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.